Let's talk about microphone preamps and let's find the perfect mic pre for you. Maybe you are a Neve type of guy or an API type of guy or something in between. Let's find out. In this video, I want to show you a bunch of different preamps. I want to show you how they sound, compare them, and I want to show you how much or how little they can change the sound of your recording. We're going to do that with both distorted guitars and snare drums, and that's going to be a lot of fun. Let's get started. But let's start with a little disclaimer. A microphone preamp will not make or break any recording. It's not going to make a bad recording sound good. So before you invest a lot of money in expensive mic pre's, make sure that you have a proper monitoring system. Great studio monitors, headphones, acoustics, get some great sounding microphones, a good computer. There's a lot that comes before the mic pre's. And in case you can't afford some high-end mic pre's right now, I have a clear recommendation. In the meantime, get some preamps from Audient like this one. They are affordable, they will get the job done, and they sound really, really good, like I've shown in many videos on this channel. However, finding the perfect mic pre for your recording, finding the right tool for the job will make the job a lot easier and will make your recording sound more like you want it to sound right from the start. A mic pre can sharpen or soften your recording. It can make it brighter or darker. Knowing your mic pre's and knowing how to use them will get you better and faster results. Let's have a look at the different mic pre's we're going to check out today. They're pretty much all available in the API 500 module format. We got to start with some kind of reference mic pre, right? And my personal reference, and it has been my reference for years, is a classic German mic pre design from a company called ADT. People say it sounds clean but not clinical, whatever that means. It's a transformer coupled mic pre that just sounds fantastic. It's kind of over-engineered and very low distortion, very low noise. It just sounds really clean. And I use that mic preamp because it shows me, whenever I compare it to another preamp, it clearly shows me the character of the other preamp. Unfortunately, Gerd Jüngling, the guy behind the company, passed away something like 2 years ago, but I think they are still around. They have their own module format called Tool Mod, and I think this preamp is around 400 to 500 euros. The next one is a real classic and needs no introduction. This one comes from API. This is the most expensive preamp of today's shootout. It's close to 1,200 euros for the module at Thomann in Germany right now. It's a classic. People love API for that immediate in-your-face sound. For our trip into Neve land, we are using a module from Heritage Audio. They make some of the finest Neve clones out there. We've tested a lot of them, and this one just sounds beautiful. This is the 73 Junior something, and I think this one is around 800 euros in Germany right now. And at least for me, it kind of nails that typical Neve sound. Then we have another real classic design. This is the mic pre from Harrison Audio from Nashville. If you don't know Harrison Audio, on one of their consoles, the best-selling album of all time has been recorded and mixed, Thriller from Michael Jackson. I gotta say, everything that I've tested from Harrison Audio sounds fantastic and really musical. Their mic pre's, their EQs, and their compressors. Here we are talking about their 500 module, the 32 something preamp. This is the transformer coupled preamp with a Jensen transformer. In some of their consoles, they use transformer-less preamps, but here we're talking about the preamp with a transformer. And for me, it kind of sits like in between Neve and API, but you will hear it in a minute. This one is around 700 euros for the 500 module at Thomann in Germany right now. Then we have a very modern design. This is the Sculptor 500 module from ELYSIA from Germany. They are known for making not only great sounding, but also highly innovative products. And I can already tell you, this is not only a very good sounding preamp, but it's also highly versatile. And you know what? The reason for doing this shootout originally was that I wanted to check out this preamp. And at some point, already deep down in the rabbit hole, when I had compared it to a lot of preamps, I was like, why don't I share this with you and also turn this into a video? So that is the ELYSIA Sculptor, and it is 750 euros. And finally, another modern design, the Camden preamp from Cranbourne Audio that has become very popular. And this is the cheapest of them all. It's only $399 right now at Thomann in Europe. I have a few channels of those as well that I enjoy using on drums. A rather clean and fast sounding preamp. Let's check it out. So let's get started. What I have here is a distorted guitar signal, 2 DI tracks that I've reamped through the exact same setup. Sounds like this. This is a DI going into a Fryette Deliverance 2 Plus tube amp and going down there into my live room into a Mesa Boogie 4x12 loaded with KARNIVORE speakers, my upcoming signature speaker. And this is a completely raw, unfiltered signal. Typically, I would add something like this. To get rid of some of the very lows and the very highs. But in this video, we want to hear the pure unfiltered signal. So I'm going to bypass this EQ. And now I want to zoom in and just loop a very short section here. That makes it easier for us to compare the different preamps. So this is the ADT preamp. And now I want to switch to the API. And in my world, the A in API stands for aggression. API preamps are the most aggressive and the brightest sounding preamps that I know, period. Let's have a listen. Let's start with the ADT and then I'll switch to the API. And that is a massive difference. It sounds so much brighter. It adds a lot of high mid bite and a treble and a lot of sparkle and a lot of rattle. It almost sounds like adding a tube screamer or something. Really extreme. And this example really shows the character of API preamps, and I think that's what a lot of people love about them, that they sound so immediate, so in your face, that they add this brightness, and especially on drums, as we will hear later, this is wonderful. On this guitar, I would say I prefer the slightly rounder and darker character of the ADT. Now let's go to the other extreme, and now let's have a listen to the Heritage Neve style preamp, because Neves are known for having a rounder tone, not really rolled off in the highs, but like softer and smoother, and a fatter low end. Let's go from the API to the Heritage Neve. And just like I expected, the Heritage sounds a lot rounder and softer than the API, also a little thicker in the low end. And it also sounds softer than the clean ADT. Let's compare that. So if you want something that thickens your tone a little bit and softens the top end in a nice way compared to a clean preamp, go into Neve land. So once again, API sounds direct, bright, in your face, fast, and the Neve sounds more rounded, a little darker, a little fatter. Let's move on with the Harrison preamps, and they have become one of my favorites because they kind of sit in between Neve and API. They have the fatness of the Neve, but especially the high end kind of sits in between. Not as dark as the Neve, but not as bright as the API. So let's go from API to Harrison. Again, the high end is not as aggressive, but listen to the palm mutes and the lower mids, how much thicker they get through the Harrison. The API almost sounds a little digital in comparison, if you know what I mean. All that added in there. But the Harrison still sounds more open than the Neve Heritage. So the Harrison is kind of like a happy in-between. It gives you the Neve fatness, but with a more open top end, but not as aggressive like the API. Let's move on with the ELYSIA preamp, and this one sounds really close to the ADT. Very clean. Let's compare them. Maybe it sounds slightly darker than the ADT, but very, very close. And I think that's the idea of the ELYSIA Sculptor, to be a clean sounding preamp, because it has a fantastic sounding feature. It has a knob that is called Shape. And you can switch between Shape 1 and Shape 2, and you can use it to shape the tone of your recording. So Shape 1 will give you a more rounded top end, and it will also increase the loudness a little bit without actually compressing the signal, and it sounds really, really nice. So this is the clean ELYSIA, and this is Shape 1 at maybe 30%. It sounds warmer, it sounds fatter, it sounds more rounded in the highs, it also sounds louder. Really, really useful. And it kind of pushes the ELYSIA more into a Neve direction. And I've done some tests before. Let me just scroll up here where I've pushed it all the way. So this is clean. And this is full Shape 1. Which is a little too much, I get it. But you can see it sounds like a mix of a pushed preamp and like a tape saturation kind of thing. It makes things sound rounder and warmer, and is really, really useful. And again, it pushes the ELYSIA Sculptor in the direction of a Neve preamp, if you ask me. What a cool feature. But they did not stop there. There's also a Shape 2, which sounds totally different. This will add more highs to your signal, and it will actually push the ELYSIA preamp more in the direction of an API. And you can go really extreme. So in this example, I'm only using 10 or 15%. We'll go from clean to Shape 2. Let's have a listen. And I gotta say, this makes the ELYSIA preamp by far the most versatile of the bunch. With the Shape 1, you can push it into a Neve direction. With Shape 2, you can push it into an API direction. Really, really cool. Let's move on. The final preamp is the Cranbourne Audio Camden. And if we go back to the ADT, you will hear that the Cranbourne also sounds brighter. It sounds a little more like an API. It is more aggressive, and is the second most aggressive preamp of the bunch. Actually pretty close to the API. Let's have a listen. The API is still more aggressive, especially in the upper mids, but it's quite close, and that's one of the reasons why I like the Camden preamp for drums. On drums, this is where the API really shines. Maybe not on guitars like this. So let me sum it up. API, most aggressive of them all by far, followed by the Cranbourne Camden. Then we have the Harrison, which seems to be a nice blend between Neve fatness and API aggression. The darkest of the bunch is the Heritage Neve 73, which sounds wonderfully warm. And then we have the ELYSIA, which is rather clean, but with its shape function, you can really push it into totally different directions. Let's move on with the snare drum. So what we have here is a SE Electronics V7X on top of a Pearl free-floating snare drum. And in this case, it's obviously not the same take. I had to hit the snare like separately for each take. So that means the hits might sound slightly different, but you will hear that the difference between the preamps is actually bigger. Sounds like this. Now let's just loop one of those hits. And as usual, we'll start with the ADT. Sounds pretty good for a totally raw signal. So now let's move on to the API. Buckle up. And wow, this almost sounds like somebody has turned on the snare wires or something. It sounds so much more present, airy, open, and in your face. The ADT does have a little more punch coming from the batter head. But what a huge difference. And this is where API preamps really shine. Talking about punch, the king of punch is the Harrison. So if we go from the API to the Harrison, you will see things get quite a bit darker, but also fatter. So that means if you want more sparkle from your snare drum, go for the API. If you want more high frequencies, if you want to get more low-end punch, the Harrison is better. Now what's really interesting, I expected the Heritage 73, the Neve type preamp, to sound maybe even darker and just as fat and maybe a little slower, but this is not what happened. Let me go from the Harrison to the Neve. And this actually sounds brighter and faster. It's much closer to the API. And it captures the snare wires really nicely. I think the reason is that the Heritage Neve 73 has a very fast transient response, which didn't matter that much for the guitar example, but here you can hear the difference. So the Harrison and the ADT feel a little bit slower. Let's move on to the ELYSIA, which once again seems to be a little darker than the ADT. So the ELYSIA sounds a touch darker than the ADT, but you know what? Remember, we've got this shape function, and this is, on a snare drum like this is where shape 2 really shines, where we can push the ELYSIA more into an API direction. So let's go from ELYSIA clean to ELYSIA shape 2. Nice. And now let's compare the shaped ELYSIA to the API. And I think that's impressive. This preamp is so versatile. You can, like I told you before, you can push it into Neve or API direction. It's really, really versatile. And finally, the Cranbourne Camden preamp is once again close to the clean sounding ADT, but once again, a little more aggressive, maybe a little faster. Let's start with the ADT. But not as bright and aggressive as the API. And I think this is highly interesting, that preamps behave differently depending on the source. For the distorted guitar signal, it's much more about the frequency response. But when we record percussive signals like a snare, the transient behavior and the speed of the preamp matters. And what might sound kind of fat and a little darker on a guitar might actually sound a little different on a snare drum like this. So the whole idea of this video was to show you what a preamp can do for you and to introduce you to the character of different preamps. And I hope I was successful. Now it's up to you to decide what you want, what you like, or what you might need on different sources, depending on what you record and how you want it to sound. If you ask me, on the guitar example, I think I would have gone for the Harrison, because it kind of nicely sits in between Neve and API and has a nice fat low end. It doesn't sound too aggressive in the top. And for recording the snare drum, I think I would have gone for the API because it's so snappy and in your face. Then again, I gotta say the ELYSIA Sculptor is a wonderful preamp because it's so versatile. I just decided to use it for my masterclass that I will be doing in 2 or 3 weeks at the MetalCon in Frankfurt. I will be showing how I mic and record guitars. And I know that ELYSIA will have a booth at the MetalCon, so hopefully they will give me a few Sculptor preamps because it feels like this preamp can do it all. Really, really nice. By the way, MetalCon is happening. This is a wonderful event, a whole weekend, very intimate, 25 to 50 people max, packed with masterclasses and cool stuff from people like Nolly, Gomez, David Castillo, top metal producers in Frankfurt. There's a link below. Get your ticket now. It's going to be an awesome action-packed weekend. And we've got pro audio brands coming there as well, like ELYSIA, so you can check out some cool gear. Okay, that's all for today. Quick and dirty, very spontaneous. Again, originally I was only testing a preamp. Now this turned out to become a video. I hope you enjoyed it. Leave a comment. What's your favorite mic pre of the bunch that I showed you, or maybe something else that you are using? How did you like this video? Leave a comment. Subscribe to the channel if you enjoyed this. I see you in hell, motherfuckers. Bye-bye. Today we are announcing the very first MetalCon in Frankfurt, Germany, a convention for everyone out there who is into metal music studio production. Taking place at the wonderful Studio 301 in Frankfurt, this event will have masterclasses and workshops by world-class metal producers from all genres. You can learn from them and watch them recording, mixing and mastering live. But that's not all. We will have some of the best pro audio brands there presenting and showing their gear, microphones, outboard gear, guitar amps, software and much more. We will have discussion panels with industry professionals, and last but not least, you can get together and meet fellow metal producers and have fun.